Forbes, one of the most recognized business and culture publications on the planet, a magazine that has spent over a century tracking wealth, power, and influence. They cover billionaires, tech titans, geopolitical shifts, and global market trends. They don't write about K-pop artists unless those artists have crossed a threshold so significant that ignoring them would be journalistic negligence. So when Forbes published an article specifically about Jimin's numbers in Mexico, right before BTS kicked off the Latin American leg of the Ararang World Tour, a lot of people stopped and asked, what exactly is happening here? Why is Forbes paying attention to one member of a K-pop group in one country? What does the data actually say? The answer, when you look at it carefully, is one of the more extraordinary stories in the global music industry right now. And today we're going to tell it properly. Let me set the scene for you first. It's the first week of May 2026. BTS has just landed in Mexico City as part of the Ararang World Tour, their first visit to the country in 9 years. The demand for these concerts has been nothing short of staggering. Over 2.1 million people attempted to buy tickets for just 150,000 available seats across 3 nights at Estadio GNP Seguros. President Claudia Sheinbaum had personally written to the South Korean president to request additional show dates. That's not a fan club petition. That's a head of state making a diplomatic case for more BTS concerts. Think about what that sentence means for a moment. The Mexican government treated BTS's arrival as a matter of national cultural significance. On May 6th, the members were officially invited to the National Palace, where they met with President Sheinbaum, and then appeared on the balcony above Zocalo Square, one of the most historically significant public spaces in all of Latin America, to greet over 50,000 fans who had gathered below. That square has hosted independence celebrations, political revolutions, state funerals, and on that afternoon, it was filled wall to wall with people holding BTS light sticks, chanting names in Korean. Jimin was on that balcony, with long blonde hair, dressed in a sharp classic suit. He stood there and waved to the sea of people, and the crowd's reaction was electric. Local broadcasters captured it. Fans who couldn't get tickets took overnight buses just to stand outside and feel some part of this moment. Jimin recorded it on his phone from the balcony and posted it to Instagram with 2 words and a heart. Mexico, gracias heartsuta. That image, him looking out over tens of thousands of people, captured something that Forbes noticed. Because by the time Jimin stood on that balcony, the streaming data behind his name in Mexico was already remarkable. Here is what Forbes reported on May 7th, 2026, the day the concerts began. Jimin had accumulated over 97 million streams on the Mexican Spotify chart, the highest total of any solo K-pop artist. Not just K-pop artists currently active, not just artists on a comeback cycle, all of them. And he wasn't just leading the solo K-pop category. In the broader ranking of all K-pop acts in Mexico, Jimin sat in second place, with only BTS as a group ranked above him. Think about the significance of that. The only thing standing between Jimin and the top of the entire K-pop chart in Mexico is his own group. That's not a coincidence or a short-term spike. That's a sustained, long-term listener relationship between Jimin and a country of 130 million people, many of whom don't speak Korean, who have nonetheless built a genuine emotional connection to this artist's music. And Forbes wrote about it. That's the thing that matters here. Forbes doesn't allocate editorial space to streaming numbers unless those numbers are telling a larger story about cultural movement, consumer behavior, or market power. The fact that they chose to highlight Jimin's Mexico numbers specifically at the moment BTS was landing in the country suggests that someone in their newsroom recognized what was happening. A solo K-pop artist had organically built the kind of Latin American audience that most Western acts would spend millions of dollars in regional marketing to achieve. To understand why this is significant, you have to understand what the Mexico music market actually looks like. Mexico is the 5th largest K-pop market in the world. That's a number that's exploded in the last decade, driven largely by YouTube, social media, and the passionate organizing energy of Latin American army. But the dominance within that K-pop market is not spread evenly. Most K-pop acts, even very successful ones, remain niche. They have dedicated fan bases, but they don't penetrate the general listening population. 97 million streams is not niche. 97 million streams means that Jimin's music was being played by people who weren't just dedicated superfans. It was playing in cars, in kitchens, on playlists people built for themselves, on shuffle, on repeat. It means that somewhere in the city of Monterey, someone who's never bought a K-pop album has, like crazy, on their workout playlist. It means that in Guadalajara, a university student has, who on repeat during finals week. These aren't hypothetical scenarios. The data is telling us that this is actually happening. And here's the part that should make you pause. Most of that 97 million came without any significant Spanish language adaptation of his music. Jimin doesn't sing in Spanish. His songs are primarily in Korean, with some English on his solo records. He didn't collaborate with Latin artists to drive regional penetration. He didn't have a specific Latin America promotional campaign. The streams came because people just kept listening, over and over, because the music connected with something in them that didn't need a language to translate. That's actually rare. That's genuinely rare, even by global pop standards. Let's talk about Jimin's solo catalog, because it's impossible to understand the Mexico numbers without understanding what he's built as a solo artist. In March 2023, Jimin released his debut solo album, Face. And from the moment it dropped, it didn't behave like a typical K-pop solo release. The lead single, Like Crazy, debuted at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, the first time in history that a Korean solo artist had ever achieved that. Not a group, not a collaboration with a major Western feature. A solo song by a Korean artist, in Korean, going straight to the top of the American chart. It stayed in the Hot 100 for weeks, accumulated over 1.4 billion Spotify streams, and rewrote what was thought to be possible for the genre. Face itself debuted at #2 on the Billboard 200, making Jimin the highest charting Korean solo artist in that chart's history at the time. And unlike some big opening week numbers that collapse immediately, the album had staying power. It crossed 1 billion streams on Spotify, the first K-pop solo album ever to do so. Then in July 2024, while Jimin was still completing his mandatory military service, his second album, Muse, was released. And it did something remarkable. It proved that the success of Face wasn't a lucky break. Muse debuted at #1 on the Billboard Global 200. The lead single, Who, his first fully English-language solo track, debuted at #14 on the Hot 100, which is exceptional for a cold debut, and eventually peaked at #12. It then went on to spend 33 weeks on the Hot 100, the longest chart run for any K-pop solo act in history. By early 2026, Who had surpassed 2.3 billion streams on Spotify, making Jimin the first Asian solo artist without a Western collaboration to reach that milestone. His total solo streaming count across all credits exceeded 8 billion on Spotify. More than 6.5 billion of those streams came from his 22 pure solo songs, the ones with no collaborations, no featured Western artists boosting the numbers, which made him the first and only K-pop solo artist to reach 6.5 billion streams on solo output alone. These are the songs that ended up playing 97 million times in Mexico. Now let's go back to the concert itself, because the Forbes article was one piece of a much larger picture that unfolded across 3 nights at Estadio GNP Seguros. On the first night, May 7th, Jimin walked onto that stage, and something happened that concert observers noticed immediately. His stage presence was operating at a different level. He's always been considered one of K-pop's elite performers. He was crowned Best Male Dancer in K-pop for 7 consecutive years in major global polls, but in Mexico, there was an intensity to his performance that seemed to take it somewhere new. Midway through the show, he delivered a moment that became one of the most talked about of the entire Mexico run. A surprise abs reveal that sent the stadium into absolute chaos. But what people kept coming back to online wasn't just that one moment. It was the full picture of him on stage, the control, the precision, the way he occupied every inch of the space. He wasn't performing for 50,000 people. He was performing for each person individually. And then at the end of the concert, he did something he's made a signature habit on this world tour. He pulled out his phone and read a message in Spanish. He had prepared it, learned it. He looked into that crowd of Mexican fans and said, "You listen to our songs a lot, right? Thank you from the bottom of my heart. I didn't know you'd be this amazing here. You really know how to have fun. You're the best. I love you more than anyone." The stadium exploded. It's worth noting that he had done something similar in Japan, reading a handwritten letter in Japanese to the Tokyo Dome audience. The pattern is clear. At every stop of this tour, Jimin is making the effort to speak to fans in their own language. Not a translated subtitle on a screen. Not a translated line read awkwardly. He prepares. He rehearses. He learns. And when he delivers it, the authenticity of that effort comes through completely. Mexican Army felt it. The response on social media that night was overwhelming. But the fan response to Jimin in Mexico went beyond just what happened inside the stadium. In the days leading up to the concerts, local Army had organized one of the most visible fan support campaigns in recent memory. Ad trucks wrapped entirely in Jimin imagery circulated around the stadium district, turning the streets around Estadio GNP Seguros into something between a gallery and a declaration. Photos and videos of these trucks spread across every platform, generating waves of international coverage. Inside the concert venue, throughout all 3 nights, fans holding Jimin photos and placards were visibly everywhere, something that local broadcasters specifically captured and highlighted in their coverage. And on social media, the trending hashtags told a story of their own. Welcome Jimin to Mexico and Bienvenido a Mexico Jimin both rose to the top of Mexico's real-time X trending rankings in the days surrounding the concerts. For context, the Comscore media analytics firm had actually documented Jimin's dominance in Latin American social media back in 2021, when their analysis showed that among all BTS members, Jimin received the highest percentage of individual mentions across Latin American social platforms, at 25.6%, ahead of every other member. 5 years later, that dominance hasn't just held. It's grown into streaming records, trend rankings, presidential welcome ceremonies, and Forbes articles. That kind of long-term consistency in a market this large and this passionate is not something that gets manufactured. It gets built slowly, through music that connects, through performances that are unforgettable, through small genuine gestures that fans carry with them for years. The reactions from fans across Latin America in the days following the Mexico concerts are worth spending time on, because they reveal something about what this tour means to the region. A Peruvian fan wrote, "Thank you, Mexican Army, for the warm welcome. BTS knows well the passion in Latin America." A Colombian fan posted, "For Latin fans, BTS is a voice of hope and love." And then there was a comment that stuck with a lot of people. One Mexican fan recalled that the last time their country had seen a welcome of this scale for a music act was the Menudo concert at Azteca Stadium 44 years ago. And another fan shared that when they heard the announcement of BTS coming to Mexico, they couldn't get tickets. So they took a bus at 1 in the morning to the capital just to be near it. "I'll never forget this," they wrote. Forbes noticed the numbers. But behind every number is a story like that one. Let's talk about what the Forbes article specifically represents in terms of industry recognition, because this is important for understanding where Jimin stands in the global conversation. In the music business, most trades and financial publications track artists through a fairly predictable set of metrics: album sales, chart positions, touring revenue, brand deal valuations, streaming milestones. Forbes tends to focus on the intersection of cultural impact and commercial power. When they wrote about Jimin's Mexico Spotify dominance, they were making a specific editorial judgment that this data point was part of a larger story about the evolving geography of global pop. Because what Jimin represents in Mexico isn't just a popular artist having a good touring moment. It's a Korean artist becoming a genuine organic institution in a Latin American market, reaching the kind of listener depth that most Western acts can't achieve even with massive regional marketing investments. 97 million streams doesn't get bought through promotional spend. It gets built through genuine connection over time, across multiple releases, across multiple years. And the fact that this happened to Jimin specifically, not as part of a general BTS wave, but to him as an individual, with his own solo catalog, his own identity, his own distinct emotional presence, is what makes it newsworthy at the Forbes level. He is the only K-pop solo artist in Mexico with that number. That is the sentence. Out of every solo K-pop artist releasing music, promoting in the market, with fan bases organized and active, Jimin is the only one who hit 97 million streams. Not close to it. First. Alone. Now let's zoom out, because Mexico is a piece of a much larger picture. The Ararang World Tour, BTS's first full group world tour since their reunion after completing mandatory military service, is currently one of the most watched touring phenomena in the global live music industry. 85+ concerts across 34 cities in 23 countries. A projected revenue figure that industry analysts have placed in the hundreds of millions of dollars just for the North America and Latin America legs combined. Ticket demand, so intense that the standard secondary market metrics barely apply. Within that tour, Jimin is one of the most tracked and discussed individual members. His stage moments consistently go viral. His social media posts from tour stops dominate the fan conversation. His Spanish greeting clip from the Mexico concert was shared across fan accounts in dozens of countries within hours of the concert ending. And all of this sits on top of a solo career that, by almost any objective metric, is one of the most accomplished in the history of Korean popular music. First Korean solo artist with a #1 on the Hot 100. First Korean solo artist to top the Billboard Artist 100. First Asian solo artist to reach 2.3 billion streams on a single song without a Western collaboration. 8 billion total Spotify streams. 2 solo albums that each broke records for Korean artists on the Billboard 200. Both of his title tracks, like Crazy and Who, recognized at the BMI Pop Awards among the 50 most performed pop songs of their respective years. Forbes saw a data point about Mexico and wrote an article. But the data point exists within this context. It couldn't be separated from everything Jimin has built across his career, from the album he made and released while in the army, to the way he prepares Spanish phrases on a phone before stepping in front of 50,000 people, to the silhouette photos he posts from behind-the-scenes shoots that make fans feel like they're part of the story even from thousands of miles away. There's one more thing worth talking about, and it's something that goes beyond charts and streaming numbers. Jimin posted the view from the National Palace balcony. He filmed Zocalo Square, that massive historic plaza filled with tens of thousands of people holding light sticks and looking up. And he captioned it with Mexico, Gracias Heartsuit. 2 words and a heart. That's it. That post spread everywhere. Korean fans watching from the other side of the world described feeling genuinely moved. Mexican fans who couldn't get concert tickets said it made the whole experience feel more real, more personal, as if he was sharing what he was seeing with them directly. International media picked it up as an image that captured something about the scale and sincerity of the moment. This is the thing about Jimin that numbers have a hard time fully explaining. The streams, the chart records, the Forbes article, they're all real, they all matter. But they exist because of something underneath the numbers. There's a quality to the way he connects with people, whether it's through a stage performance or a 2-word Instagram caption, that registers as genuine. People feel it in the music. They feel it in the performances. They feel it when he stands on a balcony in a country that isn't his own and takes out his phone to share the view with everyone who couldn't be there. That quality has been documented by people far outside the K-pop world. Film director Gus Van Sant once named Jimin as an artist he wished to collaborate with, citing a quality of peaceful presence. Olympic figure skating champion Yuzuru Hanyu, someone who has reached the absolute peak of his own art form, cited Jimin's choreography as a source of personal inspiration. Ryan Gosling once gifted him a guitar that held personal significance. These aren't manufactured press moments. They're people at the top of their fields recognizing something in Jimin that resonates with them creatively and humanly. The 97 million streams in Mexico are the measurable surface of that recognition. The fans who took overnight buses to stand outside a stadium, who covered trucks with his image, who filled Zocalo Square and screamed his name louder than some of them had ever screamed anything. They're expressing the same thing that Gus Van Sant and Yuzuru Hanyu expressed, just through a different language. So why did Forbes write the article? Because sometimes a number is so clean and so clear that it tells a story on its own. 97 million streams. Highest solo K-pop total in the entire country. Second overall behind only BTS as a group. Before a single concert had even started. Before the abs reveal. Before the Spanish speech. Before the balcony. Before the light sticks filled Zocalo Square. The number was already there. It had been building for years, quietly, album by album, stream by stream, in the phones and earbuds and car speakers of 130 million people who had made a decision, often many times over, to listen to Jimin again. Forbes wrote the article because it had become impossible to cover the business of global popular music without acknowledging what Jimin represents in Latin America. Not as a phenomenon, not as a curiosity, as a legitimate, sustained, market-moving cultural force. And if you needed any further confirmation of that, you just had to watch 50,000 people standing in one of the most historic squares in the Western Hemisphere, in the middle of a weekday afternoon, holding purple lightsticks and screaming a name in Korean. México. Gracias corazón negro naipes punto. The number explains why Forbes wrote the article. What happened in Zocalo Square explains why the number exists in the first place.